Home flipping is a dying art. A record number of buyers backed out of their transactions in February. And are there really 600,000 more home sellers than home buyers? This is the Reality Report.
I keep it real. I keep it real. I keep it real. Just keep it real.
Hey guys, it's Sam Hartman, keeping it real estate here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm a local realtor in Fort Wayne, and I am always researching the real estate market and seeing these headlines. And I want to bring the context and clarity to these headlines and articles that you need to be confident real estate consumers out there. So let's jump into it. Is the art of home flipping dying? Well, we actually saw that home flipper profits were at the lowest point since the great financial crisis. Home flipping saw a boom after the COVID pandemic hit and accounted for about 9% of the resale homes in the market in 2022. That's just over 450,000 homes. So what is bringing this practice back to earth? Because here in 2025, it accounted for 6% of homes, just over 350,000 total. Well, one of the main reasons that we see in the data is that the profit margins of these investors is shrinking. For one, there's more competition between investors and people that are looking to buy their home as a homeowner. So that competition has put upward pressure on prices and compresses the margin that those investors might be able to gain by flipping the property. Now, personally, I actually like this headline. I think this is good for the housing market because I think renovations in the hands of a homeowner are always going to be better done, better received than, say, a home flipper. Because a homeowner is not just putting repairs and putting cosmetic updates into a home to maximize and get the absolute biggest margin and value out of them. They're putting it into the home so that they love the home, so that they have a great place to live, that they have a safe place to live. And so a homeowner, in my opinion, they're always going to invest in a home more carefully, I would say, more intentionally, and then they're going to live in that home for the time being, at least for the near future, before reselling it. So they don't need a big margin on their updates and repairs and finishes that they're putting into a home that they buy, but over time, that home will continue to appreciate. The renovations that they make to the home will help appreciate their home as well. So I like this. I think that a home in the hands of a homeowner is much better served than in the hands of an investor or a home flipper. But let's look at these returns on their profits and their margins. So gross profits on an investment property that is flipped this last year accounted for a profit of about $66,000. So don't feel too bad for the investors. They're still making on average 66 grand when they flip a property. But the return on this investment is at a low point since 2007, and that is just about 25% margin. So that is compressed substantially from kind of the peak in 2011, 2012, where they were making a 60% margin on their flips as well. So that's a big difference. That is a big limiting factor. You know, the saying, is the juice worth the squeeze, comes to mind. I think a lot of investors are looking at a lot of deals and just not seeing enough margin to make the project worth their energy, their headache, their effort, the uncertainty of what goes into flipping a property too. But if you've ever considered flipping a property, here's a great stat that's important to know. How long should the process take? And on average, days to flip in 2025 was 163 days. So that gives you a little bit of a runway, a little bit of a planning timeline to know, hey, how long should this take? How long will this take to budget for your holding costs in terms of mortgage payments and financing any repairs that you may do or anything like that? 163 days is the average time it took to flip a home in 2025. Buyers are getting cold feet at a record rate this February. 14% of home sale agreements fell through in February of 2026. This is a record number and up from 12.8% in 2025. I felt this trend in 2025. I felt the pressure on buyers. I felt the affordability effect on buyers in 2025. So I'm not surprised to see this trend kind of continue to carry into 2026 as well. You know, buyers are paying higher prices. Prices have appreciated substantially, especially since COVID-19 had hit and the post-pandemic housing market. They're also paying higher interest rates than we had during the post-pandemic housing market. Interest rates have kind of been ebbing and flowing between 6 and 6.5%. So this is quite a bit elevated from the 3%, the 2.5% that we saw in 2021. But it is down from the 8% that we have seen recently as well. So we have actually seen affordability improve over the last year, but it still does not seem to be affecting some of the concerns that buyers have when it comes to extraneous expenses of purchasing and buying a home. Here's the long and short of it. Buyers have higher expectations of the home that they are willing to buy. So here's what sellers need to know about that. Sellers, you need to have your home prepared to sell. And what does that mean? Well, buyers need to not just love it online, but they need to love it in person. It needs to be in good condition. And another thing that we can do to help prepare a seller and prepare a home is to have the home pre-inspected. Sellers almost always worry and lose sleep at night about the inspection process. So why not get that step out of the way up front by having the home pre-inspected so that now you can present and disclose that inspection to a buyer, and that buyer can make a confident choice and decision about moving forward on a property. I probably had more transactions fall through in 2025 than I've had in my entire career. And I had it for some of my sellers, and I had it for some of my buyers. And so this step, this preparation, this pre-listing inspection for sellers can go such a long way in having your home presented and prepared in a way that a buyer feels more comfortable taking next steps and moving forward on it. Now, for buyers need to know that cold feet is not a reason to not buy a house. Fear and worry is not a reason to not buy a house. There are steps and processes that you have to follow and contractually go through to make sure you properly evaluate a home, make sure you have a contractual reason to not buy a home as well. And so that is one of the biggest and most important reasons as a buyer that you need to make sure you have a trusted partner in terms of your realtor to advise you in those situations as well. Now, are there really 630,000 more home sellers than home buyers in today's market? Redfin is reporting that this is the largest gap between home buyers and home sellers ever recorded. Now, here's where context and clarity comes into the picture. Their data only goes back to 2013. I see a lot of doomer type of people on the internet who, if you look back on their feeds, they've been calling for the housing market to crash for the last 10 years. But these people are pointing to this graph, they're putting to this schism, this gap between available home sellers and available home buyers in today's market. And they're saying, here it comes the crash, here comes the wave. They're saying it's worse than the housing crash of 2008. Well, this data wasn't recorded in 2008. So that's the first thing to know. So let's not paint with a broad brush and make sweeping statements of data that never existed in the first place. I want to put some contextual and anecdotal data to this in our Fort Wayne market, because I do not sense this in our market at all. There are certainly markets in the US that are kind of taking a hard hit. They have high inventory. They have low buyer demand. They have more affordability challenges than many other parts of the United States. This is Florida, Arizona, Texas, areas like this. The Sun Belt states are being hit the hardest in this regard. But here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, I'm not sensing that. And I have some data points to point to that will put some context and clarity to this article, at least as far as our Fort Wayne, Indiana housing market goes. So this is February data, okay? So our inventory is up in February, just 7%. Not a huge drastic change, and it actually hasn't had a major increase in new listings either. So that 7% change is just a few more listings taking a little bit longer to sell. But how about days on market? Our days on market are still 30 days. So extremely, historically speaking, fast-paced market. Your home taking 30 days to sell, although it feels slow compared to 2021 and 2022, this is not historically a long time to have to market and to sell your home. So it's still a pretty advantageous seller's market. We're certainly not seeing home prices crashing. Our median sale price in February is up 10%, and year to date, it's up 4%. So all of these data points, all of these things happening in our Fort Wayne, Indiana housing market are really great indicators, really great signs, really positive things to say about the Fort Wayne, Indiana housing market. So I don't put a lot of stake in some of these big, broad, sweeping headlines that are grabbing data from across the country, because I know there are markets that are struggling right now, but I also know our market is not one of them. So that's it for the reality report this week. What have I missed? What articles have you seen or have questions about? Make sure you contact me and reach out so that I can cover it in next week's video. Thanks for keeping it real estate with me today, guys.